let's say instead of coming, it's the same line item, but it comes in now at $1.25, will, as the inventory goes out, will it go first in, first out?
Okay.
Is that the way it does it?
That is a great question, and actually what we do is we do a step actual. And you might be like, oh, I'm looking for FIFO, LIFO, and all this kind of stuff. So a step actual is real numbers. What was it? What is it? And then we have this thing that we're actually working on. This is a potential for the future, but it's called an internal cost correction, okay? So basically, if you wanted to be super, super detailed, you're like, okay, I've got to sell these first 104 exactly at $1, and then I've only got to sell. Do you know what a nightmare that is? Okay, you don't want to go there. Okay, you are basically trying to like, I'll just say it's a nightmare. Okay, but basically, as soon as you put them all in a big giant bundle or a bin or a bucket, how are you supposed to know which ones were which? So what we do is we do a stepped actual. If you change the cost, the new ones will go out at new cost. And what we will do, and this is a piece that we are adding, you can currently do it, you just have to do it manually, but we're going to automate it. What we're going to do is we're going to say, let me help you do some math on that thing. What did you have coming in? What would it cost? What's coming in? What's the cost? Let me do the difference. Here's your perfect thing. And basically adjust that cost of goods sold. So one of your invoices might have got to ride. Like, say you actually got those new bottles in at the price, but what happens is say they went out at the dollar or whatever, that particular invoice gets to ride for a little bit. We just let it disconnect for a little microsecond, then we reconnect it when we're like, I really want to get these numbers typed. We'll reconnect those numbers for you. But that's a great question. It's a great question. If you change the cost, it automatically will start tracking the history. Hey, I went up. Hey, and we can actually pull reports. Which things changed? What's happening? What's going on? How does this affect my values and stuff? So it gets very interesting. Those are great questions. This is real life stuff. That's what happens. I'm not sure if I answered your question. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So in order to be in the AP bin, your waiting room, you already have to have it, you maybe just haven't paid for it yet.
Okay, correct. So basically what that is like I owe some money to somebody. It could be an internal person. It could be, so say I'm going to buy lunch today for you guys. You guys are excited. So what I'm going to do when I get done is I'm going to have a receipt. Okay, I'm going to have a reimbursement that I'm going to turn in as a business expense. Okay, so guess what? Eventually, I'm going to turn that in, and that reimbursement is going to end up in that AP waiting room, even though I'm an employee of the company. I'm still a payee. Okay, and then basically what will end up happening is depending on when we decide to pay me back, it'll sit there and say, we owe Brandon $100 for lunch, or whatever, and it just sits there and kind of adds and adds and adds up. And then if I go, you know what, man, we have tons of money. Let's spread some out. Let's get some of this stuff paid down. We go into the AP area and we're like, I'm going to pay, and we end up cutting a check, and all of a sudden I walk away with $1,000. But guess what? It's satisfied all of these little teeny pieces or parts of the pieces, and then it's basically that's what ends up happening. We're literally tracking that data through time as far as how it acts and interacts with the different pieces. But that's exactly how that works. It has to exist before you can even hit the AP waiting room. And guess what? That's a permission. Do you think I want that bull in the AP waiting room? Okay. That's an admin, that's an accounting type function. If you have your person who's working your counter and say they're really good at getting some stuff in and they can talk to the people and sell, they most likely aren't going to be paying bills. So in the map, they'll still see that physical piece, but if they click on it, I can't even go there. You want to see me deny myself right now just to even get in there? If you want to, basically it's a permission. It's as easy as a permission. Permissions and settings, they're huge keys, huge keys. Okay, any other questions? This is great, and this is kind of a random demo, and we've been all over the board, but in a way, this is kind of what Adilas is. What do you need? What are you doing? What is your goal? What's your goal? And then you bounce accordingly.
So say like they wanted to order these bottles and pay for them before he received them. So how would we pay that out? And then do you just flip it and make it live and just say, I haven't received it yet, but it's live, I need to pay it, I've ordered it, I need to put the money out there, and then I will track it when I receive it.
Okay, so
when I get my receipt.
So that's a great question. And what I would personally do is I would personally kind of have to trick the system. We have a couple settings we're going to be adding to the PO section to kind of help it track that, like, okay, I've already paid for it, so technically that's an asset to me because I already paid money out. Like, I've got something coming in, but it totally flips it. Everything we've been doing so far is just kind of running simple operations. As soon as you start saying, I'm going to order this, I'm going to prepay for it, and I'm hoping that it's going to come, you don't even know this, but guess what you just said? Balance sheet. Okay? You just said, this is somebody else's money or something that somebody else owes me. I need to stick it on the balance sheet. So that's basically what happens right there. And I can tell by a couple of your looks like, whoa, what's, like, you just have to realize as soon as you start playing with who owes you money, who do you owe money, usually that type of stuff is all tracked on the balance sheet, okay? It's no longer, hey, I got a product and I paid for it, or I got a product and I haven't paid for it yet. That automatically gets tracked. If you do it this other way, we actually have to add a couple settings. What I would do personally right now is I would say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to set it as live so I can actually attach the payment. It'll go through as if it's already done. And then what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to either just kind of say, okay, I don't really have those. I can either flag it. Basically, we're missing one little piece there.
So in the notes, you just put, I
Yep.
don't have this yet.
Yep. This should be coming in December. And if we wanted to, we could even add a little piece of history, like a personal little flag to this and be like, hey, I did this one just so that it would track through fine without messing with. We need to add a little piece there so that it can perfectly do that. But I would just trick the system a little bit and then put some notes in there. That's how I would do it personally.
And then do you search it by the flag later, or do
You can
have
search it
your-
by any certain ways, however you wanted to do that. Steve, you actually do a bunch of that type of stuff. Do you have any comments on that?
We usually do quite a few different little pieces in that same manner. So basically, Randy, you covered it. I don't know how deep you want to get. Do you want to get deeper?
Basically what happens is it becomes on order, in transit. It's in a flux state, okay? It doesn't really exist yet. You've requested it, but you've paid money. So then ideally you have to track that, and you do, and you can track it. So what I would personally do is I would say, okay, I know I don't really have it, but in order for me to flow it through the system, I'm going to say it's live, because I really am paying for it. I really want it to really count type thing. And then you would have to kind of, it's almost like, I had to treat you this way in order for you to know, but you're going to be here. That's how I personally would do it. And then there's lots of different ways that you can flag it, and we'll talk about that. But I don't know if that answers. Basically, it exists, and it's a known piece that we need to fix. And currently, the workaround is to trick the system on that particular piece. Do you have any other comments on that, or?
And, well, another helpful piece with, because we're talking about the requests. So another helpful piece with that, though, is that companies, what they'll do is they will actually create that request and save it as a PDF document, and then they will send it around to multiple vendors to get to, it's like you're asking for
Like a quote, like a
quotes,
quote on a purchase
asking for
quote.
bids on that. And then once that comes back, then what they'll do is they will actually, when they receive it, they can duplicate the PO again and change the item count on there as well too. To remember that they decide wins the bid or whatever.
And they could virtually even change the vendor, like if they were shopping it out. Say they had all of their own little item numbers and hey, I'm looking for this and this and this and this and this, and it's a standard thing and the person knew what it was. They give the bid back and they're like, oh, I'm going to take 4 of these from this guy and 6 of these from this guy. They could take that original little piece, it's just a request. They could duplicate it and say, oh, I'm going to turn this into live, turn this piece into live, or actually make it into pieces.
And the example you showed just was only using the basic request, right?
Correct.
So you can even get into a special request, which allows you to have mixed vendors, or like you mentioned with homogeneous inventory,
Yeah.
you could pull some from your homogeneous inventory and also some from another vendor and send that out and get a bid back on that. And then some of the people, what they'll do is they'll actually just go and create another PO when that item comes in, and then they'll just delete the one or void the one out.
Yeah, you could always
Void that. So you can use it as a tool, because the thing to kind of understand that's important is once you start a PO to a vendor and you bring items in there, the items are tied to that vendor, so you just can't go to the top like you can on an expense receipt and just change that to another vendor. Because those items are tied to that vendor only, unless you're just paying it out like homogeneous. And that's how, I didn't know how deep that you wanted to get on
Yeah,
that.
like we're treading on some light accounting type stuff. Basically, right now, what I would highly recommend that we do is actually just focus on what is your goal and how can we help you answer that. And then later on, we will show you how we account for that, okay? Because it's very important. You don't even really want to worry about the accounting until you get your inventory and your stuff flowing. Otherwise, you're literally putting the cart before the horse. If you start saying, oh, accounting, I'm going to start over here. Guess what? How am I accounting for what's happening? I can't, okay? I have to do this. Okay, what's happening? Oh, you went that way. Oh, you went this way. Oh, you went this way. Guess what? I can account so good if I let operations lead and then accounting follows, as compared to like trying to put the cart before the horse. Literally, it's night and day. It's night and day. You do have to let it disconnect a little bit at times, and that's fine. We allow that.
Something else that's really important too, while we're on the subject of, a piece that we might be missing, is the fact that when you utilize PO, you want to only utilize that for inventory. The system is set up where you can bring in freight, and you can bring in like shipping and other what we call system maintained items onto a PO. But if they have no relationship to inventory, in other words, if they're an unlimited type of an item, which freight is in our system, then when you go to pay that and expense it out, everything flows through fine. But when you go to the balance sheet will not run on that. Say it's $10 for freight for, like you were talking about, buying your bottles, say $100 worth of bottles and $10 worth of freight. So your choices are either to, first of all, take that $10, average it into how many bottles that you bought, and then just up the cost right away, or you can bring the bottles in on the PO so your inventory goes up properly and the cost on the bottles is proper. And then when you expense it, you add the $10 freight onto the expense receipt side. And then that way the balance sheet will flow through. And the reason that the balance sheet won't flow on that is because freight, in most cases, is not an inventory item. You can make it as such, but then it will show up, it'll be stuck in your inventory until you sell it out as part of the cost of goods on your invoice.
Is that the same with taxes? That's the whole principle? That cost
so-
taxes added to your product?
Yeah, so usually you don't pay taxes because you're buying at a wholesale level, so they typically don't pay you, charge you taxes. However, if you do have taxes charged on an item that you're going to sell, then yes, you would either need to decide to include that in as part of the cost of that item, or put it separated onto the expense receipt and expense it off.
And we're getting totally into the part where we're saying, how are we going to pay for this back to the vendor, and how are we going to make everything account? And it depends on how you want to do it. There are tons of different tools. As many different ways as you've seen us bounce around, there are that many ways that you can figure out what's best for your company and what's best for your needs and how you actually do this type of thing. We have companies that are virtual finance companies. And guess what? They use a PO to create the liability back to the person. And like it's really not even a real life item, but it really is a real life payable. So they actually use a PO here, and then they end up selling it back out, and then like they're tracking all the difference between what they bought it, what they ended up selling it for, and it's not even really a physical item. It's money that's changing hands. Like, use it as a tool. Okay, this is a hammer. You can count, you can pry, you can do whatever. We're just trying to help understand a little bit about what some of these tools are.
One final thing to remember too with when you're talking about PO is that because it increments inventory, what happens is the only way that you're going to get that inventory, which as soon as you put it on the PO, it goes on the balance sheet and ups the inventory account. The only way you're going to get that inventory account to be reduced is you create an invoice and you sell it, and then it will drag the costs over onto the income statement side, and then you have your expense over there as a cost of goods. The other way is to make an adjustment, at the end of the year and run a portion of that to cost of goods on the expense side. So normal sales, I think an important thing to remember about inventory is when you use a PO to create inventory, your normal sales will slowly start to lower those costs down, because every time you sell it, that piece comes over onto the income statement. And if you put freight or something on there, then you would literally have to, the next time your customer came in, you would have to sell them the bottle plus a little bit of freight as another line item to get that freight to come over.
Just to kind of keep
Yeah.
those things kind of.